Squiz Kids acknowledges the traditional owners of the lands on which we podcast, the Turrbal and Kombumerri people.
Squiz Kids!
It's your daily news fix. Fun, free, fresh.
Hello and welcome to Squiz Kids Today, your fresh take on what's happening in the world around you. I'm Bryce Corbett. It's Wednesday, June 5. In Squiz Kids Today, giant goose dino discovery, Mexico's mummy museum, historic spaceflight countdown, and big wins for Matildas and the Demon. That's what's making news, kids style.
The Lowdown.
The perfectly preserved skull of a giant goose that stood taller than a human and roamed outback Australia 50,000 years ago has been found near Adelaide, and the dinosaur world has lost its mind. The discovery was yesterday being described as a major find by paleontologists, who are people that study fossils for a living, and a big piece of the puzzle for scientists who had long wondered exactly what the ancient giant dinosaur bird looked like. Believe it or not, 50,000 years ago, all sorts of megafauna roamed the Australian continent. Fauna is the word we use for animals, and mega, well, you know what that means. There were enormous wombats, huge koalas, and extraordinarily large goannas. If you're interested, I've stuck a link in today's episode notes to an excellent Squiz Kids shortcut we produced on megafauna. The gigagoose, as it's being called, is believed to have weighed about 240 kilograms and wandered through the wetlands of ancient Australia eating fruit, diving in lakes, and eating vegetation. It's also believed that there was a crossover between the gigagoose and Australia's first people, with gigagoose eggs being an important part of early Indigenous Australians' diets. Imagine the size of the omelette you could make with a gigagoose egg. And yes, of course, I've stuck a link in today's episode notes to a drawing of the gigagoose. It's very impressive.
Spin the globe.
Each day we give the world globe a spin and find a news story from wherever it stops. And today we've landed in Mexico, where a mummy museum is in trouble for breaking off the arm of one of its exhibits. Hang on a minute, a mummy museum? Yep, you heard right. An entire museum full of mummies. And I don't mean mothers. I'm talking about the preserved remains of dead humans. You'd know about mummies if you've ever studied ancient Egypt, or even if you've watched Hotel Transylvania. A mummy is a dead human or animal that's been preserved, either by being wrapped in cloth and being embalmed with certain chemicals, or even sometimes simply by being buried in ice or snow or mud. They're pretty creepy looking. So, this museum in Mexico is in a spot of bother because when they went to move one of the mummies on display, its arm broke off. I guess that now makes it armless. Get it? Harmless? And yep, there it is, the dad joke alarm. I'm here all week.
Sport time!
And there were celebrations across the land yesterday as two significant Aussie sporting victories unfurled late on Monday night. We're talking the Matildas and the Demon. But let's start with the Tillies. After a lacklustre performance in Adelaide last week against China, Australia's favourite women's sporting team burst out of the blocks on Monday night in Sydney to convincingly beat their Chinese counterparts 2-0. All but booking a place for themselves in the upcoming Paris Olympics. What does lacklustre mean? It means not very impressive, which is the complete opposite of what the Matildas were at Stadium Australia in front of a capacity crowd on Monday night. The same crowd that gave a rousing farewell to goalkeeper Lydia Williams, who, after almost 20 years as a Tilly, has announced she'll be hanging up the gloves after Paris. And speaking of Paris, that's where the second of Australia's remarkable sporting feats took place on Monday night, as Alex the Demon de Minaur smashed his way into the French Open quarter-finals, making it the first time in 20 years that an Aussie men's player has made it to the final 8. Alex plays his quarter-final tonight, Aussie time, with his new chief cheerleader and lucky charm expected to be in the crowd. I'm talking about the French kid who's been cheering him on in every match so far. And because too much sport is never enough, it's State of Origin night tonight, where the best NRL players from Queensland and New South Wales go head-to-head in the first of 3 games. May the best team win.
Spaced out.
The countdown is on in the United States, quite literally, for an historic space mission which, all going well, will send 2 astronauts up to the International Space Station as part of rehearsals for putting humans back on the moon. The Boeing Starliner is all set to lift off from Florida this evening, Aussie time, after the launch was aborted over the weekend. Aborted is a fancy word for called off. Space scientists are confident the rocket that the astronauts will sit atop to blast off into space is ready to roll, sending the space travellers on a 24-hour journey into Earth's orbit and then eventually onto the International Space Station, which is a big science lab floating around in space above our heads. The duo will then spend a week on board the space station before clambering back into their space capsule and returning to Earth. It will be the first mission of the Starliner carrying humans. Fingers and toes crossed it all goes well.
Time for the quiz.
This is the part of the podcast where you get to test how well you've been listening. Question number 1. In which country is the Mummy Museum that broke off an exhibit's arm? Yeah, that's right, it's in Mexico. Question number 2. Approximately how many kilograms did the Giga Goose used to weigh? Well done if you said up to 240 kilograms. Question number 3. What was the score in the Matildas versus China friendly game on Monday night? Yeah, that's right, it was 2-0 to the Matildas.
Shout outs.
It's June 5. Today is Global Running Day, celebrating how good it is to whack on a pair of trainers and just go for a run. It's also a special day for these Squiz kids celebrating a birthday today. Wallace from Mackay, Sally from Brisbane, Zoe from Yass, Scarlett from South Ripley, Eric from Terry Hills, Aubrey from Hazelwood Park, and Zane from Madawi. And belated birthday shout-outs go to Mia from Caversham, Charlotte from Heidelberg West, Damien from Perth, and Cyrus from Townsville. And classroom shout-outs today go to Room 14 with Miss Irvine at Anzac Terrace Primary School in Bassendean. Year 4 literacy class with Mr. Loka at Pymble Ladies College in Sydney. Room 307 at Port Elliot Primary School. Class 5-6S with Miss Shaw at Taree Public School. Class 4-5P with Mr. Prigg and Mrs. Young at Merriweather Public School. And Class 3S with Mrs. Splain at Newbridge Heights Public School. Don't forget, if you've got a birthday coming up and you want a shout-out, or if you're after a classroom shout-out, drop us a line at squizkids@thesquiz.com.au or fill out the form on our website. Well, that's all we have time for. Thanks for listening to Squiz Kids today. I'll be back again tomorrow. And Christy, if you're listening, get well. In the meantime, get out there and have a most excellent day. Over and out.